Hello, church family. Good to have you here tonight. Looking forward to studying part of God's Word with you and just having a good time tonight looking at God's Word. So, got a couple of things I need to do here to get started. If you are on Facebook, you can throw a comment in, give you a hello there. Wow, I have no idea why it did that. Gave some kind of... All right. So tonight we're going to continue our study of prayer. And speaking of prayer, please continue to keep Joe Arms in your prayers. Joe is still struggling with some health issues. Some other members of our church family. If you're on our flock note list, you probably have information about all of that, but please keep all of those folks in your prayers. And tonight we're going to look at an aspect of prayer, and I tried to come up with a great question for this. I just really had a hard time. So the best thing I could come up with is who is in charge. And if you come up with something better than that, you throw it in the Facebook chat or the YouTube chat, and we will look at that, and I will take suggestions for better titles than this for this aspect of prayer. And we're going to continue this study of prayer for the next several weeks. Next week we'll do something a little special for Thanksgiving. I don't really know what that is yet. Working on that. Jeff is going to give me some help on that. Hopefully the next day or two. He has volunteered his time already. I just haven't been able to sit down long enough to figure out what we want that to look like. So we'll do something special next week. It'll probably be something pre-recorded. I hope that you are planning next week to have hopefully some good time with your family. I know this has been a really weird year, and I'm personally looking forward to maybe spending some family time. Try to be careful with that, of course, and social distance. Do the things that you need to do. But prayer, who is in charge? So when we start talking about Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving is... I like Thanksgiving, and I primarily like Thanksgiving because I love to eat. And when I think about Thanksgiving, I think about turkey and dressing. I think in our family, we had chicken and dressing more than turkey and dressing. And I will have to tell you that when you start talking about meals like that, and you start talking about things like Thanksgiving, turkey and dressing, chicken and dressing is really high on my list of favorite things to eat. And I am very blessed in life. My mother, my mother-in-law, and my wife all make great turkey and dressing and chicken and dressing. So when you get to Thanksgiving, that's up toward the top of the list. And then after chicken and dressing, turkey and dressing, whichever one we have, and honestly, I never know. I just eat whatever we have. I always end up getting a honey bun. Miss Beatrice, my mother-in-law, always makes me a honey bun cake or a Mississippi mud cake. And I love both of those. And sometimes she asks which one I'd rather have. And to be very honest, I do not care. I love both of those. So you get a honey bun cake or a Mississippi mud cake. You get chicken and dressing or turkey and dressing. And then my mom makes these incredible rolls, these homemade rolls. So you put all of that together. If you just gave me that, give me the chicken and dressing, the rolls, and the Mississippi mud cake or the honey bun cake for dessert, I'm fine. I'm happy. I don't need anything other than that. The only other thing, one other thing that's way up at the top of that list, but it's just not a Thanksgiving food. Okay, it is my mom's hush puppies. Mom makes the best hush puppies in the world, and I cannot come up with how to do it exactly. I have the recipe that she says that she has, which honestly she really doesn't have a recipe. She just knows. She knows how much of what ingredients to throw in the pan at the right time and the perfect way to cook them and the temperature of the oil and I've tried, and they're pretty good. They're not quite as good as hers. In fact, they lack a lot being as good as hers. But when you start talking about Thanksgiving and food, those are some of the things that are at the very top of my list. And I want to use this as an example. If I were going, for example, I knew that when I got home tonight, Diane would have chicken and dressing, and Diane makes great chicken and dressing, okay? And if I knew that we were going to have chicken and dressing when I got home, I would not stop on the way home and grab something to eat that is just not very good. You know, you wouldn't stop on the way to a big meal where you know that you're going to like what you're going to have. You wouldn't stop on the way to that to fill up on something else. I mean, that's not the time for a hot dog or a bologna sandwich. I mean, there's a place for hot dogs and bologna sandwiches, but that's not the time when you're getting ready to feast on something that is that good. You don't want to fill up on something secondary when there is this really great primary dish that is coming along. And that's kind of an example of what we're talking about when we're talking about prayer with who's in charge. We're going to use a verse tonight that honestly we probably don't use this verse about prayer a great deal. But there's a principle in this verse that I think that is really great when we start talking about the principle of prayer. And again, we'll be talking about prayer through the end of December, except for next week when we'll be doing something simple, something special. So here's the verse in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13. But before we get there, I want to show you something else. I want to look at, and I didn't put this on a slide, so I'm going to have to do this a little bit differently. Let me make this text a little bigger so you can see it well. Verse 12 of Jeremiah chapter 2. And I just want to point something out, because I think it's pretty critical. I just think it's neat. Be appalled, O heavens, at this. Be shocked. Be utterly desolate, declares the Lord. And the word I want you to think about for just a second is this word, utterly desolate. That word can mean to be desolate, and it also can mean for something to be dried up, like the ground is dried up, or a well is dried up, or a cistern is dried up. So be appalled at this, O heavens, be shocked, be utterly desolate, be utterly dried up, declares the Lord. And the reason I want to point that out is this next verse that we're going to look at. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, so they've abandoned me, they've forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. So in that verse 12, when he says, be utterly desolate, the idea of just be completely dried up, because this is what my people have done. They've abandoned me, who is the spring of living waters, and they've dug out these cisterns for themselves that cannot hold water. And there's a principle there that goes into this understanding and this idea of prayer. So I've got these two pictures here for you. So this side is dried up, drought-stricken land. I mean, so dried up that, I mean, the moisture has just been pulled out of every section of soil that it can be pulled out of. So it's cracked and dried and pulled apart. There's just no moisture there. It's completely dry. And on the other side, you have this stream of living water. Now, you might think of that as, maybe you've been to the Smoky Mountains and you've seen you've seen one of those streams as they come, from those mountains down, and the big, I mean, if you've been to the Smoky Mountains, the big rocks in there and just the rushing water. Maybe it's a stream that you're familiar with. Maybe it's um, I remember when we, and I can't even remember the name of the hill anymore, but if you know West Tennessee, if you're going from Hornbeak to Sandburg, you go down this little road, there was always a spring there, and you could stop and get water at that spring. And it reminded me of a story when I was looking at this lesson. And I don't know if this story is true. I read it in a book, so I'm going to assume that it's true, but I did not research the story. But there is a man who grew up, and his grandfather had lived in this kind of this valley area, and they didn't have running water, but they had a stream. And so this spring, they built the house so the spring would run through the house. And so if he wanted to get water, he could get water from the spring that ran through the house, which must have been really cool. But through the process of improvements and things happening, and they finally put in indoor plumbing. They covered up the spring, and they didn't use it the same way that they'd used it before. And years later, this man wanted to go back, and he wanted to taste the water from that spring that he remembered from his childhood. So they had covered it up. So he uncovered it, moved the boards, whatever they had put over it, and when he looked at it, it was dry. There was no water there anymore. And when he started asking around, the locals explained to them that spring of water, that when you quit using it, that it would find another place to go. It would divert in a different direction, and it wouldn't be usable anymore. And I don't know if that is true, but it makes me think of this kind of example, this kind of lesson. So there's this spring, there's this stream that is streams of living water. It has everything that you want in it. I mean, you never go thirsty if you're by that. And what you choose to do is you choose to go out and you choose to dig these cisterns instead of using the living water. And not only do you build them, but you build them and they can't hold water. They won't do what they're supposed to do. Now, I looked at cisterns in biblical times, never seen one, so I pulled up a couple of pictures off Google. I hope they're right. If they're not, I apologize. We'll do a follow-up lesson and put the right picture up there. And I thought this one was really cool right here. I don't know if I can get a laser pointer up here, but I mean, as deep as this one looks at right here, I think that's I don't know what that is. I thought maybe it was a person. I guess it is. It's big enough that you have steps that go down, so you would be able to walk down and get water at whatever level it would be in that. So that cistern would trap water, would keep water in it, but it's empty. And maybe here's one that is holding water, and it's not just dug out of the dirt. In Jeremiah, they've cut them out of stone. They're hewn cisterns. And so you've got those, and you've got this one that you've dug, you've cut it out of the rock so it will catch water. I mean, just think about this example. So you have access to this stream that is a perfect stream. I mean, it's everything in that stream that you need. But instead of that stream, you decide that you're going to go and you're going to create your own cistern instead of using that stream, and then you create it and it won't hold water. And I just looked at these comments over here, and Candace Monk says, gonna have to look up a honey bun cake. They're good. I'm just telling you, honey bun cake, that top notch, all right? Right on top of the food chain is a honey bun cake, Mississippi mud cake, chicken and dressing, and mom's homemade rolls, and if you have them, hush puppies on the side. And God says that is what you have done. What the people have done, they've committed two evils. They have forsaken me, who is the spring of living water, and they've cut out these cisterns that cannot hold water. And I want to think about that, and I want to talk about that in relationship to what's important to us, and also in relationship to what we pray for. Pascal I could not find this. I could not find this anywhere. Just hang on. Where I'm going is we must reconcile what we want with what God offers. But and I could not find this quote. I read in two books that this quote was by Pascal. I'm just going to tell you, I could not find it in any of his writings. I'm going to assume that the people who quoted it were correct. So I think this is Pascal, but I have not checked this out. I couldn't find it, but I didn't spend tons of time looking for it either. But it's a great sentence, even if he did not write it. It says, human beings are peculiar in that they pursue ends they know will bring them no satisfaction, gorge themselves with food that cannot nourish, and with pleasures that cannot please. That's a good sentence, because that sentence describes humanity. We pursue these things that cannot bring us fulfillment. They cannot bring us joy. I mean, maybe they can for a little while. I heard someone ask this question one time, and this question really stuck with me. At the end of life, what will you have? So at the end of life, what will you have? And you balance that with this statement that Pascal made, and you say, okay, then I'm pursuing something. After I pursue it, at the end of life, would it have been worth pursuing? You know, I made a statement in a sermon one time, and I said, the person with the biggest pile of ashes is not the winner. Because if you're hoarding up possessions, at the end of time, when God burns up the earth, everybody's possessions is going to become a pile of ashes. And the one that has the biggest pile of ashes is not considered the winner. The pile of ashes is just going to be the pile of ashes. So at the end of life, what will you have? And so I think what happens with prayer, when we start wrestling with God in prayer, and we start asking for things, and just think about how many of your prayers are, God, would you, and it's things that we're asking God to do. Would you give me this, or would you take this away, or would you make this better? Would you, and some of those are very proper. Sorry, I'm about to die of thirst. I don't want to drinking coffee. Some of that is very proper. I mean, for example, we're praying for people in our church family right now who are sick, you know, and it's very, very proper for us to pray for those who are sick. And so I'm not saying, but what kind of things do you truly trust in? Can you arrange your life so that you reconcile what you want with what God offers, where you would look at that verse in Jeremiah and you would say, you know, whatever God provides me in the fountain of living water, in the spring of living water, that is enough for me. I'm not going to go out and try to create something on my own terms. And so this broken cistern to me is you might say it's stuff that you trust more than God, or you might say it's your desire to do things based on your own ability. So the kind of the context, if you have a Bible and you turn over to Jeremiah and you look at Jeremiah chapter 2, I mean, the first question God asks is, what went wrong? What did your fathers find in me? What wrong did your fathers find in me that they went far from me, that they went after worthless and became worthless? And so the question is, why didn't they say, where is the Lord? When I took care of them, when I brought them up out of Egypt, why wasn't that enough for them? Why didn't the priest say, where is the Lord, instead of going out after an idol? You know, why are you going to Egypt and Assyria for help when you know that I have everything that you need? You know, what nation changes gods? You know, that's the question he asked in Jeremiah chapter 2. And he says, so here's what happened. You've committed two evils. I have provided you everything that you need, but you have chosen to go somewhere else. And so instead of trusting in God, even in all of the things that were happening, that they were trying to come up with a plan where they could do it on their own. And I think that probably is where broken cisterns in our world come from sometimes. We can't reconcile. The first step is reconciling what we want with what God offers. The second step is understanding that what God offers is enough. If we can just stay in God's plan and stay in His will and stay in His grace, then that will be enough. C.S. Lewis wrote incredible stuff, and C.S. Lewis wrote this: if we consider the unblushing promises of reward and the staggering nature of the rewards promised in the Gospels, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. And I really like what C.S. Lewis wrote. We are far too easily pleased. We're far too easily pleased by looking at our own ambition and our own desire and our own plan and our own power, instead of stopping through prayer and asking God to merge our will with His will. So what are some of those, what are some of those cisterns that we use in our world? And, things that we trust in, but in the long run, they really just don't hold any water. I thought about, this kind of the normal stuff, right? Like if you run your whole life after pleasure, the next thing that makes me feel good, or the next thing that I want to do, and if that is centered in your own desire instead of God's will, then very easily you can see someone who runs and spends their entire life pursuing something that never can bring true joy. It's like Solomon, the man who loves money never has money enough. Or you think about Solomon and how he every excess, right? He tried everything in the world to make him happy. And he had money, he had power, he had relationship. He tried it all until he finally said, fear God and keep His commands. We might think, you just think about governments, and this is not a political class, right? But when you think about a government cannot bring you true happiness and joy. Governments come, governments go. They just can't. They're not eternal in nature. They're not the things that we hang on to forever. You look at medicine in our society. We feel bad. We take medicine, right? And medicine has a great purpose. This is not an anti-medicine class. I take 2 pills every morning. I take one for thyroid. I don't know the name of that. I take one for cholesterol. I don't know the name of it either. I have to look it up. But I take, both of those medicines are evidently pretty necessary for me. I remember the cholesterol medicine. I tried to get off of that, and it just, my cholesterol is high enough that diet and exercise, as much as I tried, it really didn't work. And so that medicine, it must be needed for me. But it's not eternal. That no matter which medicine I take, no matter what I do, none of the things that medical science can do for me can give me eternal life. None of them can make me live forever. If you have money, and then God is so, He is so vocal in the Bible, both Old and New Testament, about mistreatment of the poor. Things like command those who are rich. I thought I had a slide for this. I was looking. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their trust and hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. So with churches, I mean, it can be a church plan, or it can be a mission statement, or it can be this creative thing that we come up with that's going to draw people in, where God says you must trust in me first. You must go to the spring of living water. So I'm not talking about lack of effort. I'm not saying that we sit on our hands and do nothing and say, okay, God, then you just take care of it. What I'm talking about is having a refocused direction based on the relationship that we have with God. Because a lot of times I think when we go to God, especially when we're thinking about prayer, we go with our plans, our ambitions, our desires. We go with using our own intellect and trying to figure out, we're going to tell God the best thing to do, and what we need God to do. And it's very simple in just looking back at Jesus in the garden, where he said, Father, not my will, but your will. Or in a couple of weeks, we're going to look at the Lord's Prayer, and he says, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's molding ourselves to the will of God. So when we mold ourselves to the will of God, then we begin to drink from that fountain of living water, and we understand that the richness of everything that God has to give us. And honesty tells us there are some things that we cannot handle, and honesty tells us that we don't want to admit it. And I think those are very true. There are some things that in our wisdom we do not have the capability to handle. There are some problems that are large enough we do not have the capability to solve. There are some dangers that come that we don't have the ability to ward those off. I mean, you think about even those that Jeremiah is prophesying to, and they see nations coming against them. Okay, how are they going to defeat a major nation in the world? They're not going to. And God says, if you will just trust in me, but they didn't trust in God. They didn't allow God to do the things that God can do. But the second part of that is, and I think the way that this relates to prayer is, it's very difficult for us in a lot of cases to give up control. And it's we want to kind of script everything for God. We want to say, okay, God, look, this is what I need, and this is the way I need you to do it. So if you will I need you to do this, 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 and this. And when we mold our will to the will of God, then what we can do with that is we can honestly sit down with God and say, God, I don't know what's best. I don't know exactly what. I have a preference. And you pray, and you pray mightily. You pray like Jesus did in the garden, but at the same time as you pray, you're praying, God, let your will be done and not mine. James says it this way: if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all he does. And the concept I want you to grasp on in that is, he's a double-minded man. You cannot have two loyalties. It's the same type of concept. Excuse me. It's the same kind of concept when Jesus says you can't serve two masters. You can't be saying to God, look, God, I want this. I want to be godly. I want to be your child. I want to follow your will. But all the time you're doing that, you're hanging on to everything that is ungodly, saying, well, I want this too. It's the absolute surrender to God that keeps you from being double-minded and keeps you from being unstable. So when we try to maintain control, I think that double-minded concept fits our lifestyle. We're not willing to submit all the way to the will of God. And I think Jeremiah gives us that image. It is standing beside this beautiful, free-flowing, pure, wonderful stream of water. And all we need to do is just drink from the stream. I mean, it is right there. But instead, we go out in our own desire, in our own wisdom, in our own will, in our own wishes. And instead of drinking out of that stream, we go out and we dig out of the rock. We cut out of the rock this cistern. And when we finish with it, we think it's just going to be just this masterful thing, right? And when we're done and the rain comes, we find out it won't even hold water. It won't hold water. It's absolutely useless. And we run off into life, and God says, don't serve money. And we go and we serve money. We think, okay, that's the thing that's going to make us happy. And God says, it's not the thing that's going to make you happy. Or we run after certain relationships, and God says, that is not the thing that is going to make you happy. And we say, oh, yes, it is. And we go to find that. Or we take off after a particular career, or if we could just move up the corporate ladder, if we could just get that next raise, that next promotion, that whatever it is. And God says, that's not the thing that is really going to make you happy. That is not the thing that's going to bring you joy. It doesn't have lasting qualities. And we spend our life running after those things. And God says, all of the time that you're running after that, here I am, the spring of living water. I can provide to you meaning and purpose and joy and everything that you need. But we just will not accept what he has to offer. Got a Bible, Isaiah 55. I didn't put this on a slide because I want you to read it. But since some of you might not have a Bible right with you, I will put it on the screen anyway. Isaiah chapter 55. And this is the type of thing that I think God is talking about. Come, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And he who has no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. I mean, just think of that concept a second. Okay, God says, okay, for anybody who's thirsty, anybody if you don't have any money, so come buy and eat. Well, how do you come buy and eat if you don't have any money? Well, because it's a gift. God's given it to you. So come get milk and wine without money, without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me and hear, that your soul may live, and I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. It's like the parables where God is pictured as a father who throws a banquet for a son that was lost and is found. It's a banquet where God makes this wonderful banquet, and he invites you to come eat at the banquet. And even though you're invited, you choose not to come. You're too busy. You bought a field, or you just got married, or you one excuse after the other. And so since you won't come into the banquet, God goes out to the edges of the road, and he brings in anybody who wants to come in and feast at his banquet. And so God is offering you everything that you need. And he is waiting on us just to come accept it. And when we look at that in respect to prayer, God says, I am like a father who gives good gifts to his children. He has everything that we need. And what we struggle to do is to take our will and to mold our will to the will of God, that we conform our image to reflect his image, that we become more like him in everything that we do. And we'll look at that over in December when we look at the high priestly prayer, and when we look at the Lord's Prayer, and when the disciples came and said, Lord, teach us to pray. And we'll look at that when we look at December at Jesus and the prayer in the garden. To be able to reach the point where we can simply say, God, let your will be done. So you mold me, you make me what you want me to be. And when I get to a decision in life, that I can stop and say, God, okay, help me see your will. Help me understand what you want me to do. So where we're going to go with this in the next few weeks, in the week of December, just so you know, is we are going to talk about the prayer in the garden. We're going to talk about the high priestly prayer. We're going to talk about the Lord's Prayer. And then we're going to spend a couple of weeks talking about how God leads and how God guides and how we can listen to God's voice. Because sometimes praying is not speaking. Sometimes the best prayers is just simply when we listen. And we're going to cover some of those disciplines as we go into December. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned something. We will be here to stream on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. I don't know if I changed this slide. I did not. The Gods Are Alive is what we are covering on Sunday morning. So please tune in at 9 o'clock for Bible class. You can tune in at 10 o'clock for worship. And you can tune in at any, you can tune in at any of those places, ClarksvilleHighwayChurch.com, GospelChariot.church, Facebook pages, the YouTube channels. Challenged by Sunday Morning Sermon. This is the last sermon Sunday in the Asking for a Friend series, and the question was about suicide. The specific question was if someone had been taking medication which adversely affected them and they committed suicide, how would God view that? So that's the specific question that we'll be looking at. But I mean, that opens up a bigger question with some other questions about suicide. So we'll be looking at those Sunday. I hope you can tune in for that. Again, there are all of the websites where you can do that. Remember Joe in your prayers. Johnny Mitchell has had some tests done. Remember him in your prayers. Probably missing some people in that. But please keep all of those folks in your prayers. I hope you enjoyed the class tonight. If you've got any comments, let me check. No questions that I see. So, all right. I hope all of you have a great evening. Thanks for tuning in.